In progress.
I would like to call to order the February 8th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Could we do roll call, please?
Yep. Misty Soldich,
Here.
Sarah Ritchie,
Here.
Al Ferris, Aaron Freeberg, Bob Ormsby,
Here.
Jeremy Preble,
Here.
Josh Ribb, Courtney Marmon. Here. And Lynn Stecker.
Here.
Next is agenda approval. Did someone approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I can second.
Gotta be quick.
Aye.
Great. Next is approval of the minutes from January 11th, 2022. Does anyone have any comments or questions, or would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I will second.
Do we need to have, if you could state your name, that would be super helpful.
It was Jeremy Bob.
Preble first motion. Yeah, Bob second.
We don't have you all voice identified yet. Wonderful. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 Next is public comment. It does not appear there's anyone in the audience for a comment not related to tonight's agenda. And seeing as there's no old business, we'll move to new business. Item A, consider recommendation on a request for approval for an amendment to Chapter 165, creating an exception to non-conforming structures. Charlie?
Yeah, I think the commission will recall at your December meeting, we reviewed a rezoning application at 404 South Jefferson Way. Was recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission, but in this application, it was made to assist a property owner in assisting to make the property a little bit more saleable. The issue with the property was the fact that it was located in the C2 zoning district. And by code, if it were destroyed beyond 50%, it would not be able to be rebuilt hindering many potential buyers on that property from securing proper financing. In that particular request, we were able to look at a rezoning. It worked well because the underlying comp plan did designate it as residential, and there was some surrounding residential uses. This particular situation with our department tends to come up quite a bit, and not all the time we have to ask for action to be taken. Sometimes, people are buying on cash or anything like that, then they don't have to worry about things like this. However, it did come up just again here a couple of weeks ago at a property at 201 East First. On this particular property, it was a rather dilapidated structure not too terribly long ago, and the property owner put some financial capital into it to improve that property. The property is zoned in the C3 downtown mixed-use zoning district, and is considered a non-conforming structure as it is used as a single-family dwelling. As with that request back in December, if the dwelling would be destroyed beyond 50%, it would not be able to be rebuilt as a single-family dwelling. It would have to comply with the C3 zoning district in the downtown commercial area. However, with the case in December, rezoning worked on this one. In this particular one, a rezoning does not work because the underlying comprehensive plan designation does show it as neighborhood mixed use, and the surrounding land uses are all either C2 commercial or C3 commercial. As we noted in our staff report, the situation does pop its head up quite often. So with that, we were asked by this particular property owner to look at some possible code amendments that we could do that would take care of issues like this. I'll tell you from my standpoint, at first, I was not too familiar with anything that was out there. And as we looked through some other communities, a lot of that was backed up. The one city that we did look at, and we looked at these cities in alphabetical order, so it did tend to be the last city we looked at because of its West Des Moines. West Des Moines has some language in their code that does do exceptions for situations like this. Essentially what it states is that if there is a catastrophe or an act of God that destroys a single family dwelling in a commercial zoning district, so something that is really out of the property owner's control, that the single family dwelling could actually be rebuilt as a non-conforming structure so long as it was built in the same location, the same general footprint as seen from the outside. It did not enlarge the structure. It did not increase setbacks or any of those setbacks lines, anything like that. There was some hesitation with this language, but what I really did like was, as we put it in there, first of all, the reconstruction should happen within 180 days. If it does not happen within 180 days, then you lose that ability to reconstruct that. And then the other exception to that exception would note that if it's a non-accidental cause, such as an intentional act by the owner, leasee, or other person, something like arson, or a circumstance where the property owner has just neglected the property for so long that it is now fallen at a level of disrepair over 50%, then the exception would not apply. So I like that language because, again, it does help us out in these situations where then the staff is able to provide lenders with letters, what are commonly referred to as rebuild letters, where we can put some pretty strict guidelines in there that say, yes, you can rebuild this if something does happen, an accidental cause, a natural disaster, something like that. You would be able to rebuild it, but it was going to have to be built within the same setback lines, same building footprint, all of that stuff. So I think we're comfortable with that language moving forward and giving that exception to single family dwellings. And again, what it does is it does kind of protect property owners and potential buyers with the ability to rebuild with accidental or causes of nature. So we did look, I mentioned we looked at a lot of other communities, and I've listed those in the staff report. Most of the communities have similar language to us. Norwalk had a little bit of variation on it, and West Des Moines is kind of really where we use the language that I've included in the ordinance that's attached to this. So I don't think I have anything else to add. Well, really quick, the one thing, and we did put in there, and this doesn't apply to this case, and really within the city doesn't apply to too many cases. But if it was a structure that was located in a floodplain and a flood destroyed the structure, this exception would not apply to that case. That's really so the city can protect ourselves with FEMA and federal insurance rates and all of that stuff when it comes to floodplain properties. So that all falls under a whole nother code section anyways, and it doesn't really apply here, but we just wanted to be upfront on this exception that does not apply. So with that, if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
I have one quick question. My understanding had been with the non-conforming use, and I guess anecdotally, I don't think it's been enforced in the past, but I have been told that if it was, like if a home was vacant after going through foreclosure, if it had been vacant for at least 6 months, that non-conforming use would no longer be acceptable. Where does that fall into this?
It doesn't really fall into this particular situation right here, because again, what our non-conforming language does say is that if the use disappears for a time period of 6 months, then that also does go away. How I personally have always interpreted that in the past, though, is that if it is a vacant structure and it's just sitting there, it's not actively being marketed or anything like that, that's kind of where that would apply. But if you have a property owner, for example, who is trying to sell a property and for whatever reason has been unsuccessful in selling that property for, let's just say, 2 years, it's not that the nonconformity will go away because you still are treating it as a single family dwelling, for example. Yes.
Yeah.
Just because nobody's living there doesn't mean that goes away. Again, your intention is still using it as that single family dwelling. And I can't speak to what other people in my position would do in the future, but I know in talking with other planners throughout the metro, I think that's kind of a commonly accepted practice. So.
Well, I guess I would just say, as someone who has quite a bit of experience with the issues that it creates for property owners, just out of ignorance of how secondary market lending works and, you know, those standards changing, I think this is very, very helpful. And I think that it makes sense. A lot of times these dwellings, like the highest and best use is how they've been used. And even looking at how, and if they were destroyed, it really would require alternate properties be part of, to actually be able to develop it into anything for commercial use anyway. So I think it makes sense. And I think that it's proactive in serving our citizens that I guess I've just seen a lot of that situations affect them. Anyone else? My only question, I guess, would be the 6-month time frame. If something was destroyed by fire, and sometimes just issues with insurance companies and timing that the homeowner doesn't have any control over. Is there like a?
I think, again, I can tell you how our staff would interpret that right now, but as long as we knew that you were actively working towards that, we would not necessarily apply that,
Okay.
you know, and worst comes to worst, apply for the building permit, maybe even before you get financing or funds
Sure.
or whatever it might be coming from insurance or something like that. But, you know, our staff does a really good job of not, you know, gosh, I have to be careful what I say, but we're very flexible with what code says in situations like that, where we can
Like
say,
taking a
yeah,
practical-
again, you didn't walk away from it. So just run a scenario here. Let's say a property owner has a fire. We don't hear from them for 8 months. They don't contact us. We don't know what's going on. And then they come 8 months later and say, oh, I want to rebuild now. That type of situation won't work. Well, again, if we're working with somebody, we know that they're going through that process and they're keeping us up to date. We're typically flexible on that.
So basically you're looking for some sort of like active work on the property within that 6 months.
Correct, yes.
Does anyone have any further commentary or questions for Charlie?
I guess I would be a little bit worried then as far as like someone sort of getting grandfathered out of it just by them, the ignorance of maybe not knowing or something. So I mean, I'm glad that staff would be sort of like in the way you guys are interpreting it. I would hate to see like a hard and fast rule happen to somebody because they hear about it and don't get back to you like within the 61st day or something like that. And I guess would it have to, let's say it was after 60 days, it wouldn't come back through planning and zoning then because this ordinance would be in place. I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to put maybe more flexibility into that.
And really quick, the time frame is 180 days, so 6 months.
Okay.
I'm curious, are there any scenarios within code language where if you put 180 days or time deemed reasonable based on?
Yeah, first of all, the 180 days.
I think it's okay to have
Yeah.
that, but maybe an or,
Yes.
like a qualifier.
Yes, and we can definitely add that in if there's some consensus here amongst the commission to add something in on that, 180 days or, evidence of, I'm spitballing language here, but I think I kind of understand what the commission's saying, and with your grace, I think we can kind of add some language in there as kind of a qualifier that essentially will allow more time if they're actively working towards a solution. And I'll wordsmith that a little bit better, but that will be the intent of the language.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
And then I would just ask from the commission, just if we have a motion for approval, and we leaning towards that way, just make sure that gets added into the motion.
I wanted
Would
the
that need-
language.
I would say, would that need to come back through or no?
No, I think we can do it under your direction.
Okay.
Yeah, I wondered if the language could be such that you'd have a construction contract in place within 180 days. Wouldn't you have to start it, but you'd have contract in hand. You can show proof that, hey, you're going to do the work. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Okay.
So an act of God in fire would mean a lightning strike.
It doesn't have to be an act of God that causes the fire. Really, what it's trying to say is that it is an accident that is beyond the property owner's control.
Okay. It could be an accidental fire.
Yep, accidental fire, tornado, strong winds, whatever it may be. And again, really, I think the proposed language is pretty specific and, non-accidental causes, and it does outline arson or neglect of the property.
Would someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, this is Jeremy. I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations of the zoning regulation amendment request with the addition of a qualifier language to be developed by city staff and included moving forward.
Do we have a second?
This
I'll
is Bob. I'll second.
We do a roll call vote?
Jeremy Preble,
Yes.
Misty Solwich,
Yes.
Sarah Ritchie,
Yes.
Courtney Marmon,
Yes.
Lynn Stecker,
Yes.
and Bob Ormsby.
Yes.
So moved. Next is comments. Charlie?
First of all, last night at the city council meeting, council did appoint a 9th member in Lynn Stecker, who is on Zoom this evening. So just want to welcome Lynn to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And
Welcome, Lynn.
yes,
Thank you.
hopefully we'll get everybody to meet soon, and we'll be good there. So really quick on the building permit report, just want to point out we had a pretty good month of January there, 15 total building permits for about $5.6 million total, 10 of those being single family homes and 1 new commercial building, which is Executive Laser Wash. that is proposed to be located really at the corner there of Hillcrest and Jefferson Way. So good month for January, and hope that's a good sign to come for the year. So that's all I have.
Excellent. Does anyone have any further comments? If not, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
This is Sarah. I can make a motion to adjourn.
We have a second?
I can second that. This is Lynn.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Have a good
All right,
evening,
guys.
everyone.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.